In 1969, a Western came out called 100 Rifles. It was directed by Tom Grease, and it starred Jim Brown, Burt Reynolds, and Raquel Welch. This movie had almost become completely forgotten. It was notorious at the time for being the first major Hollywood production to offer an interracial love scene. But if you talk to critics at the time, they thought it was a lousy picture with only a few redeeming qualities, such as the scene where the film's beautiful Raquel Welch takes a public shower under a water tank. Like most of the Hollywood westerns in the late 60s, this was shot in Spain. And as time has gone on, this movie has been reevaluated. And today, it has really become sort of a cult movie. The film takes place in the northern Mexican region of Sonora at the beginning of the 20th century and is set against the background of a cleansing by the Mexican government. The Yaquis are deported because they slow the work of the railroad down. Most of them have already been deported to the southern regions where they have been used as slaves. But there are small groups that continue to resist this takeover. The story is about a black deputy sheriff from Arizona who accidentally becomes involved in their rebellion. And this is caused by him crossing the border with Mexico to capture a half-breed Yaqui Indian who has robbed a bank and bought 100 rifles with the loot that he got to arm his people. The black American, played by Jim Brown, is very reluctant to join the Yaqui in their fight against the Federales because he just never really liked Indians anyway. But the problem is he falls for their fiery leader, played by no other than Raquel Welch. Now, Chuck Robertson, who was John Wayne's longtime stuntman, was meant to double for Jim Brown on some of the riskier stunts that were done in this film. The director planned on taking the stuntman and putting makeup on his face to conceal the fact that he was a white guy. Burt Reynolds just pitched a fit about this, and he deemed this as totally improper and stated that he felt like those days were gone and that they better get a black stuntman here right now. The production manager stated that it wasn't in the budget and that Fox would never go for it. Burt Reynolds ended up paying $500 out of his own pocket to hire a black stuntman for the job. Now, this movie was filmed in the same area of Almeria, Spain, that the television series Rat Patrol was filmed in. Now, this is a brutal place. When they filmed Rat Patrol, they had a heck of a time with the elements, and the same thing held true for this movie. It was an uncomfortable filming process. Now, in this movie, Fernando Lamas plays a big role and is one of the stars of the film. But according to his wife, Esther Williams, in her biography, during the shoot of this movie, Jim Brown defied Lamas to have a fist fight with him, just for fun. And this was done so that Brown could prove his physical superiority over Lamas. But the one thing he didn't count on, and that went awry with the plan, was that Lamas was an expert in karate. And he kind of taught Jim Brown a lesson. While they were filming the fight on top of the cliff, Jim Brown mentioned to Burt Reynolds that he wasn't too keen about being so close to the edge of a serious drop-off like that. Burt Reynolds replied to him and kind of laughed. "If we fall, the newspapers will say, 'Jim Brown, an unknown actor, died tragically.'" And one of the most memorable shots in the film is where Raquel Welch takes the shower under the water tower, and the trainload of men see her and go crazy over her beautiful body. They were trying to do everything they could to get Raquel Welch nude, and this was the only way they could come up with it, was having her in a basic wet t-shirt contest. Burt Reynolds commented later on that this was twice as sexy the way they did it, and I have to agree with it. She is just awesome in this scene. It's much more impactful letting your mind run free. Now, as I said earlier, this is one of the first movies to feature a love scene between people of different races. American African descent Jim Brown and American Hispanic Caucasian descent Raquel Welch set the screen on fire. According to numerous reports, Jim Brown insisted they have a towel between them so that their bare skin would never touch. It was never really revealed why he requested this, but it's thought that he was just trying to lessen the impact of what was actually really happening on the set. I've heard this movie called many times a spaghetti western. It actually isn't. That term is applied to westerns that were filmed by European companies, usually Italian, with a usually Italian cast and crew, and they were almost always shot in Spain, which is the location that this film was shot in. And they do this because the terrain closely resembles the northeast Mexico, southwest United States area. So although it was shot in Spain, it was produced by an American studio, 20th Century Fox, and it had an American director and producer and writers, and most of the crew was American. Burt Reynolds plays the role of a half-white, half-Yaqui Indian in the movie. Reynolds had previously played a Navajo Indian in the movie Navajo Joe in 1966. Reynolds made the statement many times that he was a descendant of the Cherokee Indians, but I don't think that was ever verified. It's kind of strange, too, that he's also played Indians on 2 television series. He played an Indian on Gunsmoke in 1955, and he played an Indian in Hawk in 1966. Burt Reynolds always said that the perfect person to be cast for his role in this movie should have been Eli Wallach. Now, according to Raquel Welch, during an interview back in 1968, the role that Jim Brown played wasn't originally a black character, which is why the romance between his character and her character was written. But they kept it in the screenplay once they had cast Jim Brown in the role. Now, there's a bunch of reports from this movie that there was some turmoil between Burt Reynolds and Raquel Welch and Jim Brown and Raquel Welch. Jim Brown says that he and Raquel Welch clashed numerous times during the filming. He stated that the thing that he wanted to avoid most was any suggestion that he was coming on to Raquel during this filming. He kind of withdrew. He wasn't very socializing with her because he felt like if he socialized with her, it might create problems. The other thing he felt that was odd about the situation was that Raquel felt suspicious and concerned that Burt Reynolds and himself were going to steal something away from her in the movie. It's odd the way these actors get real hung up on who's doing what and who's getting the close-up and who's getting more lines. Initially, it was said that Burt Reynolds was the stabilizing influence between these two stars. He said that he had various talks with Raquel and tried to assure her that nothing was going on to try to steal scenes from her. Reynolds said he spent so much time trying to referee fights between Brown and Raquel that he didn't have time to think about his own part. But that wasn't the only person Raquel had problems with. Eventually, Burt Reynolds and her had a falling out while they were making the movie. 3 years later, they were both starring in the movie Fuzz in 1972. But Raquel only agreed to do the movie after it was agreed that she would not have to appear in any scenes with Burt Reynolds. They would remain enemies until 1982, when the producers of Cannery Row from 1982 fired Welch, claiming that she was unprofessional, and they replaced her with Deborah Winger. Reynolds testified on her behalf, and he stated that although Raquel and himself didn't like each other, he said she was always on time, always well prepared, and was a thorough professional. Raquel ended up winning a big lawsuit over this, thanks in part to Burt Reynolds' testimony. During an interview after Burt Reynolds had passed away, Raquel Welch said that she realized quickly after filming began that Burt had a powerful natural magnetism and a presence on the screen, and she stated that she was really afraid that he was going to steal the scenes from her. She was trying to do everything she could to get people to look at her instead of him. Back in her trailer, she just kept wondering what she could do to fight against this. And suddenly she came up with the idea, I'll just take my bra off. And so she did. She buttoned up her tight little crop top that she was wearing, and she walked back on the set, and she said it worked completely. Although this film has its share of shortcomings, it's hard to understand why it has been neglected for such a long time. It's a very fast pace and offers several well-staged action sequences. And it stars 3 attractive stars, 2 of them at the peak of their popularity, and the third rising to stardom. There's something about this movie that I really like. I like Jim Brown's role in it. He really does a good job. And then there's Raquel. She's very easy to look at. So I definitely think this film is worth watching. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.